Hey BizBlend fam, welcome to the BizBlend Podcast. Okay, let's quickly set the tone here. So Warren Buffett says, price is what you pay, value is what you get. Now because today we are not doing hype, we are doing math, we're talking franchising financials, how much it really costs, what revenue can look like and the profit potential. Plus, the parts people avoid saying out loud. Let's look at the reality here. Like a lot of people, they get pulled into franchising because it feels safer than start from scratch. And if you are listening and you have been burned before by a bad investment, or you are carrying family responsibilities, or you simply cannot afford a financial face plant, I see you. So we are going to keep this grounded, practical, well, a little spicy, but in a respectful way, because money decisions deserve clarity. And let me introduce my guest to all of you listeners, Jon Ostenson. He's joining us today here on BizBlend. He's the founder of FranBridge Consulting. He focuses on non-food franchises. Now think senior care, home services, property management, health and wellness, and stuff like that. He's also an active investor across a bunch of asset classes and also author of non-food franchising. So with that, Jon, welcome to BizBlend and let's get into the conversation.
Perfect. Excited to be here.
Brilliant, brilliant. Okay, before even we begin with the discussion, Jon, like before diving into the numbers and the financial aspects here, what's the one misconception that you hear the most about franchise money or franchising? Yeah.
Yeah. Well, oftentimes when someone says the F word franchise, people obviously think of fast food, right? That's what comes to mind, and that's why I love educating. Wrote the book on non-food franchise and all these other industries that exist out there. You mentioned some of them, also things like kids or pets or B2B services. There's just so many different niches out there. So I'd say that's one misconception. Also I think a misconception could be that the business will run itself, that it's turnkey, just, but what it comes down to is you still have to have a good operator in place. If
Mm.
business ownership was easy, everyone would be doing it. So I make sure that people go in eyes wide open and understand it's still going to take a lot of work. But the beauty of a strong franchise system is all the support that it provides you along the way.
Mm. Mm. You know, I think I mean, I really love that you went straight to reality. And yes, I mean, I also agree that whenever we hear franchisee, we always hear about normally food franchising, McDonald's, KFC, and all that stuff. And let's get to the investment number first, John. So when someone says, okay, how much does it cost to buy a franchisee? What number do you want them to stop fixating on, and what number they should focus instead?
It is certainly a wide range. I would say most of the opportunities in the food space do carry a seven-figure price tag, and there are opportunities in the non-food space that do too. I had clients that recently bought 10 trampoline parks. Each of those were about $4 million to get into. So it can definitely be on the large side there. But what we see most of our clients getting into are more service-based businesses on average, or maybe light retail where it's not a huge build-out cost. And so when you look at the franchise fee that you pay up front, and kind of the startup cost, several months of working capital. Your all-in investment oftentimes is in the, I'd say, 150,000 to 500,000 ballpark. And quite a few opportunities kind of on the south side of that range. And so there are a lot of variables that go into it, but I'd say that's kind of the range that we see probably 80% of our clients getting into.
Hmm. That's interesting. Interesting. And are there any surprise costs that you see uh, in let's say year one? That potentially wreck people's cash flow.
Yeah, I encourage people to go in, eyes wide open. I mean, the nice thing about a franchise is you do have historical financials that can help guide you, as you build out your pro forma. You also, during your exploration process, get a chance to talk to other franchisees in the system and hear about their experience and their ramp up. So you're kind of getting these data points that you're able to plug into your assumptions. But that being said, yeah, I mean, business ownership, again, there's always going to be a surprise, right? A key employee may leave, or sometimes they're good surprises too, right? But I would say, I encourage people, let's go in, let's assume it takes a little bit longer to get to profitability. Let's assume that ramp up isn't quite as fast as you anticipate. You always want to plan low and then hopefully exceed that. But a lot of people are cash flow positive, from a monthly P&L standpoint, in that 3 to 9 month range. If they're running the business themselves, I'd say it tends to be closer to maybe 3 to 6 months in a lot of cases. If they're paying a general manager to run the day-to-day operations, obviously that's a salary. That's a big nut that you've got to cover. So maybe you're looking more like a full year until you get to that break-even point. So, a lot of variability with all of that.
Hmm. So I guess I mean it's safe to say that this kind of a uh, expectation or misconception around quick money. I mean it depends on case to case, industry to industry.
Right. Yeah, I mean, there are some that you can be cash flow positive day one. Maybe there's some pre-work that was done. Maybe you have national accounts. Maybe there's, in the health and wellness space, recovery centers or some of the fitness ones, you have signups, prior to opening the doors, and you could be cash flow positive day ones. That, those are things that we take our clients through. I mean, we work with over 600 different franchise companies that are looking to expand the stalk markets to expand into. And so many different niches within there, and each one's a little bit different.
Yeah, yeah, that's for sure. That's for sure. And like what I also think I think the working capital aspect is also huge, because um not sure whether it's right or wrong, but people would treat it like, extra. But I think that exactly is like the oxygen tank here. Like working capital, total all in investment, or maybe payroll, marketing, build out, equipment. I mean, and I think surprise costs, they would also include the hiring, local marketing, and as you mentioned about the profitability, so it definitely makes sense. Um, and John, if you had to give listeners a quick rule of thumb, how many months of operating cash do you like to see set aside before they sign anything?
Mhm. So now 150 to 500 range, that would include several months of working capital, with the assumption that you're not going to be profitable day one, right? So that you're going to continue funding the business there in the short term. And, like you said, I mean, I call it the oxygen of profitability. How fast can you get to that monthly P&L so that you're now not funding the business, but the business is at least dropping to the bottom line, the operational cost. And, in a business, you're going to have fixed cost and you're going to have variable cost too, right? So, again, I think you get some good information going through the exploration process before you ever sign that franchise agreement. So you at least have some educated assumptions. If you were to just have a startup, then you're using a back of the napkin math, right? Here you've got some hard data and some, points from other franchisees too. And there's actually you know, oftentimes we see people who are looking for existing businesses to buy, and they say, "Hey, that way we've got all these historical results, and there's a team in place and market awareness, and that could be a great proposition." But so oftentimes they've been looking for 3 years or 4 years or 5 years for that business, and that's time they could have been spent building a business, right? And so I always encourage people, "Hey, let's get in the game, let's get going, quit just sitting on the sidelines." And you can always buy a business down the road too. It's the next thing you do probably won't be the only thing you ever do. So, and there is risk to buying an existing business as well because you're inheriting someone else's team, someone else's culture. And whenever that happens, you tend to lose some of your key employees or potentially key customers. And here you paid a premium for that business, assuming nothing was going to change. So again, that's some of the reason I like the franchise model and just the proposition that it provides, and the visibility to your point on, yeah, how do you build out that pro forma and assumptions going into it?
Hmm. Yeah, I really find it as a very good point, especially um, if anyone would ask me, like, what I find the best about franchise model. And John, I mean, we are seeing like huge pivotal shift in way people do business, or the customer behavior, the market, and the economic trends and everything post COVID. Um, have you seen a similar kind of shift in the franchise model? I mean, it's industry agnostic, but in this franchise model, the entire perception around this pre and post COVID.
Mhm. I would say, yeah, if we use COVID as an example, I'd say that the theme that we see, people are looking for understandable cash flowing businesses, things that aren't going out of style, that are non-trendy. I'd say a little more needs-based businesses. I'd say post-COVID, they don't want things that are as flashy. It's more like, hey, we want something that we can count on, that's always going to be needed. Um, but then even in recent times here with AI and what AI is doing, we definitely see a shift. I mean, I read an article in the Wall Street Journal every day, and it feels like every 2 or 3 days that there's another one about, white collar workforce, is concerned about losing their jobs. And the CEO of Ford came out and said half of our white collar jobs won't be around in a couple of years. I mean, they're becoming more and more bold in these statements. And I see that playing out firsthand on the ground. I have never seen so much interest in franchising. I think for a variety of reasons. Part of it coming out of the pandemic years ago, people finally said, "Hey, I've been thinking about business ownership. Maybe now's the time to take take that chance." And now we're seeing so many people with the technology background or consulting background. They're saying, "Hey, we see the writing on the wall," or maybe we feel okay about our job, but we're being asked to do a whole lot more with less people.
Yeah.
And so, or I'm tired of traveling. I'm ready for that freedom. And I mean, they're coming to us saying, "Hey, we don't know what it looks like. We don't know what industry we want to be in. We're a blank slate. But let's look at some opportunities and kind of see where it goes."
No, I absolutely. And I mean, in many of my conversations, I've really found, and this is specifically, with regards to um, this assumption that, franchise model would probably work better in a food industry and not likable maybe in the non-food industries. But I'm really seeing some very innovative concepts actually scaling very well, mindfully scaling in their franchisee model, whether it's, as you mentioned, some of the examples like pet, there is in beauty, wellness, in fact, in public sanitation, and then, pet grooming, and even, daycare. I mean, there's so many now different industries coming up and actually on franchise model.
Absolutely. And it's eye opening to people because I love, first off, it's entirely free to work with us. So let me get that out of the way. We're essentially a real estate broker, but for franchises, we get a referral fee from the brands. None of that's passed on to our clients. So what I'll do is I'll take a client, get to know them, and then say, "Hey, if I were in your shoes, here are 12 opportunities across different industries that I would be interested in considering that are open and looking to expand in your market." And that's when the light bulb starts to go off for them. They're like, "Gosh, I never thought about dumpsters, but if I can make that kind of money," or we've had clients do incredibly well with youth soccer, with kids swim lessons, with senior care, with senior fitness, that works with different, a lot of people have a B2B services background. And so that may be a freight brokerage type opportunity, or it might be insurance adjusting or consulting around cost mitigation for small and medium sized businesses. And so, it is fun to expose them to these things again that they never would have thought of on their own. And we've got nothing against the food guys. We need them. We support them. It's just my humble belief that there are easier ways to make money.
Exactly, exactly. No, I mean, it's food business. I mean, it may look uh, good and exciting, but if you look at the backside, and there's a lot of challenges. But then, I think it also comes down to how passionate you are. I mean, yeah, it's no small feat.
Yeah. And I'll say this too, not every franchise system is created equal, right? You've got a couple thousand companies out there, and just like any industry, you're going to have good players that provide great support to their franchisees, and you're going to have some that don't provide great support. They're not ones you'd want to be essentially married to, right? So that's where we come in to try to help. And, you know, th- I mean, I've just seen firsthand how diverse backgrounds, all sorts of, different fields or geographies, they come together under a shared system of support of what they can do now as new business owners because you've got franchisor on the sidelines supporting them like a coach. You've got, the ability to buy in bulk. You've got learnings that you're getting from other franchisees. There's this built-in mastermind, right, in the system where you're learning from each other and just kind of shortcuts your path to success. So yeah, again, you talked about misconceptions at the beginning of the conversation. Oftentimes, I think people think it's all about brand, right? In food, it's all about brand. In hotels, it's all about brand. But what about the $50 billion insulation industry? Most people can't name a brand of insulation, right? I mean, and so it's all about the support systems in getting their franchisees, to third base faster than you would be able to on your own.
Yep, yep, makes sense, makes sense. Let's get to the math here. First let's talk about the revenue numbers. Um, honestly, like they get thrown around like confetti. So, John, what actually drives revenue in non-food franchises? Is it the territory size or the lead flow, ops discipline, pricing power, or the brand presence around the owner, or is it absolutely something else?
Yeah, I'd say it's all of the above, but probably the two biggest for again, when we have 600 different companies that we're talking about here, it's everyone's gonna be a little bit different, but I'd say two common through lines would be, the lead generation, right? And that's something that's you're evaluating a franchise, you want to understand where's the business going to come from, right? And part of that's going to be on the franchisor side, where maybe they're running the digital advertising for you. Maybe they've got national accounts in place in some cases, or built-in referral partners. But then part of it's going to be on the franchisee side, getting involved locally, maybe getting involved in the Chamber of Commerce or, sponsoring the Little League baseball team down the road. It's some of that awareness in the market as well. And when you have those two marrying each other, then you really have, you're set up for success. So I'd say those are the biggest things, but end of the day, it's all the above. Some of the retail businesses are a little more transactional where, it's kind of like you set it in the right location and you run some marketing and they come in the door. Service-based businesses where maybe you're, getting calls off of your marketing and going to their home. They may be a little more sales oriented versus transaction oriented. I'd say most of these aren't like overly salesy. They're more consultative type sales, right? But there are some that are true sales opportunities that are a great fit for people with that kind of background.
Hmm. Hmm. Um, especially non-food franchising, like what typically determines, whether um the franchise becomes like a high margin asset versus, just an expensive job.
Yeah, you never want to buy a job, right? I always joke, I'm a business owner. I spent many years in corporate world. I'm the hardest boss I've ever had, right? But I love it. I wouldn't have it any other way. Absolutely love what I do, and can never go back. I think part of that depends on the franchise system. Part of it depends on the individual and their mindset. Half of those that we work with come in and they want to be owner operators. They want to be the ones running the business. Now, some of them do have the mindset that over time they want to eventually replace themselves and move on to the next thing and work more on the business than in the business. But we have half of our clients that start out day one putting a manager in place to actually run the business for them. And, again, if it was easy, everyone would be doing it. So I don't want to sugarcoat it, but it does make it doable in a lot of cases because you've got that franchisor and their team supporting that operator, and they can handle a lot of the day-to-day questions. And then it just comes down to having the right operator. If you've got someone that you trust and incentivize, then they could essentially run the business for you. If you don't have the right person, then you're going to find yourself leaning in. Um, so that's really kind of, and that's probably one of the top questions that we get asked is, hey, can a business be run semi-absentee? Some call it semi-passive or executive model. In a lot of cases, the answer is yes, if you have the right operator.
Absolutely, absolutely, absolutely. And one thing I really, which you actually shared, and I think that is something which I'm definitely going to retain away, especially when it comes to franchises. Um, there is, I mean, because they have, I think that's exactly where the beauty lies here, that they're locally present. They kind of, become the backbone of that particular city or town or state. And I think the structure is, I mean, I think for a successful franchise model, I think that becomes a kind of the secret sauce here, that whatever structure and process it all started with, that is replicable. And I think it's also the decentralization here, that if you have multiple franchises across the entire country, or maybe if even if you're going global as well, the structure, the foundational process is replicated, but then the kind of legacy is established in such a way that someone who knows the local market in there, someone who has who is connected with the customers locally on ground, I think that absolutely plays a very vital role in the success and longevity of the franchises.
Exactly. No, you said it very well. I was in London this summer, and I spent some time with the CEO of a large swim school company, and they sold out the UK over the years. Franchisees performing great, and they were looking to enter the US, and I kind of helped them with that. And recently had some clients in Raleigh, North Carolina, buy into it, and they came back and bought more territory. They've been so pleased. But that's an example of business that is replicable. They've got the systems, they've got the technology stack already day one. Yeah, there's going to be some marketing tweaks, right? Entering a new market like Raleigh, North Carolina versus the UK. However, they've understand, when you've got a quality product, you can kind of adapt it for those local marketing.
Mm.
I've got a client in Denver that just pulled in Denver, Colorado, that just pulled the trigger on a pool cleaning franchise, kind of staying in that same swim lane here, if you will. And with that is a business that actually started in Canada. They figured out, how do you operate in cold markets, right? How do you create enough demand and need year round to be able to support homeowners with pools? So, but that would be a very different business down in South Florida as far as how they go about it. So, yeah, every franchise system needs to be able to ebb and flow and have some flexibility. But end of the day, it's all about the processes, the systems, and the people. That's the value add to new owners.
Exactly, exactly. And before we wrap up, let's challenge a bit the narrative here. So, John, some people would say that franchising is a business ownership with training wheels. Others say it's buying a job with rules. Kind of what we discussed just a few minutes ago. Like, where do you land, and what is the most honest way to know which one it will be for a specific buyer?
Yeah. Again, I would say think about what's right for you for this next season. You look at so many case studies of clients of ours, and how they scale over time. Some will buy multiple locations out of the gate. Some will buy just one, but then they're made that opportunity to buy other franchisees over time, right? And so you're building, kind of a bigger empire there by acquiring others. Some will come back to us and buy more brands. Some will go out and start their own company now that they've got the franchise experience to build off of. So there are a lot of different paths. And again, it comes down to the individual, their mindset, their stage of life, what they're looking to do, and in part the business as well. There are absolutely cases where, and again, not every franchise system is created equal, right? There are ones that want an owner operator and kind of lock them down, and they may feel confined within four walls, right? But then there are others that you really serve as a great springboard. I think of a client of mine in actually in North Carolina as well, Nathan, or I'm sorry, South Carolina. Nathan, he's the largest franchisee of 2 Men and a Truck. He does about 45 million in revenue per year across 12 different markets. And every year or two, he comes to me and says, "Hey, John, what are you liking out there?" And we've got this young guy that we want to promote and give them responsibility. And he'll buy into another franchise system, put them in charge of it, and kind of support them from the sidelines. And so, I think that's a great kind of example of what can be done when you think big and you have that growth mindset.
Of course, of course. I think this is also a very important point, before we conclude. Um, you know, a lot of deals happen because people use leverages or SBA loans. So when does leverage make sense in franchising, and when is it a trap? Just like wearing a nice blazer. Yeah.
Yeah, no, I'm glad you asked the question. I think it's very relevant because again, most people are getting into things that are between 150,000 to 500,000. in most cases, they're not paying all cash. We have some people who will, but a lot of people like the idea of paying 20% cash and then leveraging the other 80%, almost like you're buying a home. And SBA loans here in the US do tend to be the most common mechanism. Banks obviously prefer lending to franchises. That's a very common approach. Probably 2/3 of our clients use SBA loans to fund their purchase. Um, and obviously the interest is tax deductible. Some people like to roll over their retirement plans through what's called the ROBS program, ROBS, and that's where they can actually purchase the business with a retirement plan. They pay themselves a salary, um, from it. Some will use that in conjunction with the SBA loan. So there are a lot of different ways to make it happen. And kind of to your question, yeah, some people love the idea of leveraging. A lot of
Mhm.
real estate investors invest in franchises. They love the idea of taking on debt. That's what they're used to. Others say, "Hey, I'd rather not take on the monthly debt payments." Some love the idea of self-directing their retirement dollars. Others say, "I don't want to touch my retirement." So it really is. It comes down to the individual, but there are definitely a lot of options that they can utilize.
And are there any red flags that would show up in a borrower's plan, that would make you think, I mean, that this is going to be a cash flow chokehold?
Yeah, when we think about opportunities, a lot of times franchises may be earlier in their development, right? They still have good territories available, but you're catching them earlier in their growth. It comes down to having good people behind it. And every investment I make across different asset classes, including franchising, I'm looking at the people behind it. And I think that's your biggest indicator of success in the future. What have they done in their past? What are they bringing to the table? What people have they surrounded themselves with? So I'd say that's the biggest piece. Obviously, we're also looking at the financials, the competitive advantages. We're looking at what current franchisees in their system are saying, but so much of it comes down to the people. So I'd say, you know, a red flag to me, to your question, would be, if you don't have a strong leadership team that has both industry experience, but also franchise experience on that team.
Mm. Yep, that absolutely makes sense. John, so before we wrap up, if our listeners, if they would like to connect with you, what would be the easiest way?
Yeah, and I'd love to share a free copy of our book, Non-Food Franchising, which you can get from our website. So come out to our website, FranBridgeConsulting.com. That's FRAN bridgeconsulting.com. Share your email address. We'll reach out with you with links so you can download the book. And if you'd like to take a next step and jump on an intro call, again, entirely free, I'd be happy to jump on calls with any of your listeners and help them process the idea of franchise ownership and what it could look like in their case.
Super, super. There you go, listeners. I'll have all the details in the show notes. So just go and explore John's website, book offer. You can connect with him, schedule a call, explore all the options out there. And John, refreshingly real, grounded yet. This was a very, very, I mean, it was a very rich conversation, providing a lot of clarity, especially when it comes to financing and franchise. And I think we really touched upon some of the very important foundational aspects here. So thank you so much. This was really, really amazing.
Thanks for having me.
And to all the listeners, if you are in a season where money feels tight, or maybe you're scared of making the wrong move, you're not behind, you are being careful. That is not fear, that is leadership. And if this episode helped, share it with one friend who's been kind of flirting with the idea of franchising and needs a reality check with empathy. Until next time, this is BizBlend, and I'm your host, Sana, and I'll catch you in the next episode. Thank you.